Okay, everyone, I am super excited to be talking to Julie Kraft today. She is an author of two books and many other accolades that she will explain a bit later. So, hi, Julie.
Hi, so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. I think everyone will be really inspired to hear your story and have a little peek into your life. So without further ado, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your story?
Okay, all right, you might need to cut me off, but I'll try to give you the Coles Notes version. So, first off, I'm coming to you today from Vancouver, British Columbia, where I live with my family. My husband and I have been married for almost 25 years. He's a
Wow.
very patient man, and we have three daughters. So, I am a wife and a mom. But as you mentioned, an artist, an author, and now a fiery, passionate mental health advocate. I've been advocating for about 6 years now, but a little bit of my story. So I'm actually going to go way back to childhood. I'll zoom into my life though, and just because a lot of people will ask, were there any signs or symptoms? What were you like as a child? So I'm actually a pastor's kid. So that by nature meant that our family moved about every 2 or 3 years throughout small towns in Ontario, Canada. And so right off the bat, that meant that I was sort of living in a fishbowl. I did feel that pressure, not only every Sunday morning, but throughout the week, because when you're the pastor's kid, everybody knows who you are, where you live. And so I think even from an early age, I did feel that pressure. And I think I started to put on that mask and play, that perfect little girl role. As a kid, I was very creative. So I was the one writing, musicals for the neighborhood kids. I think I created a summer
Whoa.
school curriculum, invited all of the neighborhood kids. So explosively creative. But I excelled at school too. I was kind of the teacher's pet, but I think I wore the mask at school too, and so would come home, be very dramatic. My mom says of her four kids, I was definitely the hardest to raise. But she would just say, the teachers would say, what an angel that little Julie is, and she would say, are we talking about the same kid? And so definitely loved school, but my reactions to things, even as a kid now looking back, were very extreme and dramatic. Just one quick example, I was in grade 1, some of my gum flew out, fell on the carpet, and instead of just telling the teacher or picking it up, I stood on the gum for as long as it took, which meant the teacher trying to get me to move, vice principal, principal, and eventually the standoff did not end and my mom had to come. So those types of reactions were very, very extreme. And so now looking back, I think, then at 10 years old, our family moved across Canada to Vancouver. And for me, being from a small town, that was a very defining moment where I went from being, sort of top of my class to a small fish in a big pond. The city was overwhelming. And so I really started to become very insecure. Then puberty set in, my eyebrows fused together. And so I think a lot of those insecurities are normal as,
Yeah.
teenagers.
All,
But
all, all kids like that, yeah.
for me, it went above and beyond. So I would stress about my voice on the phone. I would stress about sweaty hands, anything and everything I would start to be insecure about. And so that really started to be to a crippling level. And then add in boys, super awkward. But my first serious relationship was right after graduating high school, and it ended in utter heartbreak. And a lot of people might say, get over it, Julie. Everyone has their heart broken. Not a big deal. But for me, I was absolutely crushed. And looking back, that sent me into what I now look back and know is the deepest and darkest depression of my life. So I haven't experienced a lot of depression, but that definitely, that entire year after that breakup, I need to say I was ghosted. Some not so great things happened, but I just didn't have the self-confidence or the wherewithal to sort of just realize that I was going to be okay. And so I barely got out of bed. I had no energy, ate the same thing all day, every day. My friends begged me, just come out on a Friday night. And it was just as if all the color in my world had gone. I thought, this guy was my knight in shining armor. And I think sometimes we compare our heartache to someone else's. And if it crushes you, if something's happened in your life, even if someone's had it, even if it appears they've had it 20,000 times worse, it doesn't invalidate your feelings or how that affects you. So I always try to remind myself, for me, that heartbreak was devastating. But there is always hope. And so after that year where I was at university, I don't know if there are so many details, but when that happened, that breakup happened when I was actually away from home at university. So I think that made it even harder. But upon returning, I met my shining armor, my husband. And 7 months from our first date to the altar, that was our timeline. We fell madly in love. And yes, I threw up a lot of red flags, still a lot of insecurities and anxieties. But I think my husband thought, hey, she is the cat's meow. It's all good. She might be a little insecure, struggle in a few areas, but it's all good. I'm just going to get her a bouquet of roses and we're good to go. Well, that was not the case. What followed was me becoming a mom very soon after, at least 9 months after. I need to clarify that for my kids and my parents. But you would think, finding your knight in shining armor, getting married, becoming a mom, that would sort of fix everything. But if anything, the pressures of being a wife and a mom just only added to my anxiety. And so for 14 years, and that's how long it took until my diagnosis, I lived every day with anxiety. And so to give everyone listening a more specific picture, grocery shopping. It took everything in me to get out and get food for my family. Driving, I'll put driving at the top of the list. I remember shaking and sobbing with my newborn in the back seat, driving through downtown Seattle, just imagining being in like an 18-car pileup and never recovering. Phone calls were life-threatening. I just found things that were, everyday tasks, even answering the door for mail, Halloween night, trick-or-treaters, it all was just completely overwhelming. And I knew I was struggling, definitely knew I was struggling, but I didn't know if everyone else was struggling that much or if, I just was having a little bit of a harder time. And so my coping mechanism was a giant smile and a mask. I was the life of the party. If you met me at a mom's group or on the street, you would think I had it all together. I did not. And then part of bipolar disorder, which I didn't know then, were those periods of extreme highs. And so during those times, I was absolutely the life of the party, take it up 5 million notches. And so, if you ran into me during one of those episodes, you would just think I was a blast. And so what would happen though, after I would come out of those high episodes, I just felt like I had to keep that facade up. I had to keep up that level of energy. No one would like me if I showed up and was just, ugh, which is how I really felt. And so I had actually created this vicious cycle of wearing the mask, but then coming home, unleashing on my family. And I'll speed up my story. 36 years old, some very dramatic behavior, and basically my husband, who reached his limit. I never thought he would, but I think he realized the toll it was taking on him as well as our children. At the time, they were 12, 9, and 3. I was given an ultimatum. Basically, you need to go and get help. This isn't working for you or our family. Go and get help, or I don't know if our marriage will make it, and I don't know if the kids will get out of this unscathed. And so that's what it took for me. Didn't want to go. I think if it was up to me, I don't know if I ever would have gone for help. A lot of pride in the situation, which I'll admit. But we went. I think I was kicking and screaming, but soon after I did receive an official diagnosis of bipolar 2. Didn't want to hear that, have so many feelings around that diagnosis, but I'm happy to report it's all good. And so it took me quite a few years to sort of wrap my brain around my diagnosis, but I am here with you,
Yay!
sharing my story for the world. And so I have now come to a place of absolutely embracing it, wouldn't trade it in, which shocks people. And so now I will share my journey anywhere, anytime, any place, even the border. I have a story about that. And there's so many reasons why I'm out here. It's not only healing for me, but the thought of helping even one person, giving the world a face of bipolar that, you don't see maybe very often, or at least more people are coming forward now. But there's so many reasons I'm out here, but that's where I've come to. It's been a long road. I wouldn't change any of it. It hasn't been easy, but thrilled to be here. And so I don't know how I did. That is
Woo, you did
my
great.
life in a nutshell.
That honestly, I think it's really important to really note that on the outside, someone could be looking like they have it all and, really, really actually struggling inside. And, mental illness doesn't necessarily take on a certain face or form. It's different for everyone. And I think it's very strong of you to kind of go through that and not necessarily go and get help until like well after. And tell me more about the situation with your husband and your kids, and how you support each other, especially your husband and yourself.
Yeah. So it's so much easier now. It's probably the hardest part of my journey to reflect on, look back on, and, I need to accept, that some of my behavior, it really did affect them. And so I'll sort of talk a little bit to before my diagnosis, how it affected them, and then how it looks now, which is, I'm still married. My kids still call me mom. So there is so much hope for anyone out there thinking, I'm a terrible mom or I could never be a mom. So, before my children, they grew up a lot of their lives before mom got help. And so that meant no play dates. I couldn't handle spontaneous anything. I couldn't even handle the drop-offs or the pickups. So they grew up with very minimal play dates. I wasn't able to put them in sports or extracurricular activities because of my issues. And so they missed out on so much. And it wasn't that I didn't intend to be the best mom. I think I was just so overwhelmed with life and anxiety. I mean, even driving them to a soccer practice would be hard for me. And so my kids definitely missed out on a lot. And then, my husband, I think oftentimes home, when the front door closes, that's the only time we can really take a deep breath, relax. And so he was my punching bag. He took the brunt of everything. We would go to a Christmas party and I would be the life of the party, bring out the karaoke machine. And he probably was watching from the sidelines saying, oh my goodness, we're going to get in the car on the way home. And this amount of energy that she's, given out, I know it's not genuine, and she is going to crash. And so I have to not beat myself up, not shame myself, but at the same time, I absolutely need to step up and take responsibility. And so from the moment of my diagnosis, which, I mentioned I didn't want to go, but I think sometimes if we don't want to get help for ourselves, we need to do it for the sake and the sanity of the people around us. And so the minute I got my diagnosis, it was not easy. I think I used to look on that day, I might cry, Erin.
You know what? This is the real conversation.
Everything goes. This is real life. It's hard stuff, but good stuff. Probably I used to say it was the worst day of my life. I look back, it's now the best day of my life, or one of the best days. I'll throw in my wedding day and the birth of my children.
Throw that in.
I'll throw it in. But that was the day that I was given an answer and a reason. And I think from that moment on, there's a great quote by Maya Angelou. And it says, when you know better, you do better. And from that point on, I needed to step up, take responsibility, reflect on my past. I needed to go and revisit, some friendships where I realized I had really hurt some people very deeply. They had no idea why. I've, made so many apologies to my kids, and I've now been able to explain. A lot of people say, do your kids know? When did you explain? How young is too young? So because of the age range, of my kids, that meant very different conversations. A 12-year-old versus a 3-year-old. So my older kids now, 23 and 19, they know it all. They know bipolar. They know mom has it. I did write my book, so they saw me in there hour after hour. So they have a full understanding of what the disorder is. They've been to some of my speaking engagements, so they know the full meal deal. And my youngest daughter, I think she was about 9 or 10. And I sat her down, I think, after one outburst, which I'd like to say there's no cure. I'm still on my mental health journey, so I'm not perfect. I still have my ups and downs. They're not as extreme, but they're still there. And I just said, you know what? We're going to have a conversation, and I want you to know that mommy loves you, but mommy's brain is actually wired a little bit differently, and it sometimes makes life a little more stressful. And so sometimes when mommy does things or, yells, yes, I yell sometimes. I want you to know that doesn't mean mommy loves you any less. That just means that mommy's struggling a little bit. And a light bulb went off for her, and she just said, what, really, mom? All this time I thought you wanted to be acting like that. So I think kids are very resilient. They're very wise. My daughter even then took my pill sorter bottle, the kind you get at the dollar store Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yeah. And she said, Mom, do you have paper and some Scotch tape? And I said, sure. And she said, can I have your pill bottle? I should have brought it. On every single day under the little flip up, she put an encouraging note like, you're a rock star. Mom, I love you. Don't give up. And I thought, for a 10-year-old to understand and just do that just blew me away. So I will say I have amazing kids, but she'll even be, online, or I think she was watching a My Little Pony video that someone had put up, and the pony was acting very erratic. And someone in the video said, your pony must be bipolar. And she said, Mom, I need to show you something. This is stigma. And I'm like, yes. So if anything, I'm training my kids, I think, to be more aware, more empathetic. They're my mini mental health advocates. I may or may not pay them for likes on social media, but they'll be the first ones. And my daughter's now in grade 7, and she said, Mom, this was before the pandemic, which we're currently in, which is why my roots haven't been to the hairdresser yet. It's all good. She said, Mom, do you think you could come in and speak to my class? And I thought, for a grade 7 kid to want their mom to come in and speak about having bipolar, I mean, it blows me away. It just shows, I think, how far we've come. And so, the school opened up their doors. The class was amazing. And so now, as far as my family understanding my disorder, they understand it, and they also help me out. So if I'm staying up late, super duper excited about a project, if it's 3:30 a.m., my daughter will say, Mama, you know about your sleep. You need to get it. Go to bed. Work on it tomorrow. Or, my husband will gently say, we're out of milk. We have no food in the fridge. I know you're excited, but might be time for you to think about heading to the grocery store. So they kind of know the warning signs, and I can talk a little bit more about, what mania or depression looks like now that I'm, in a more stable place. But I just look back, I'm so incredibly grateful for my husband, his support. He gave me the green light to start sharing. I really needed to have their blessing to do that, because writing my book, I did share, it's not only my story, it's their story. So they gave me the green light, and, I haven't turned back since. So all in all, I think it's made my relationship with my kids stronger, and my marriage stronger. They always say someone that's fallen down and then gotten back up is maybe stronger than the person that never fell. And so I kind of need to look at our struggles that way. So we're together, we get along. Yes. So our family and my marriage has survived. And I'll just add in, that's another thing that I think a lot of people think, that bipolar disorder makes someone incapable of having stable, healthy relationships or being a fantastic parent. And I say, no way, Jose. Yeah.
So that like warms my heart. I have like chills on my arms just because it's so refreshing to hear a family support each other so much, because I just think that, going through what you've been going through, a lot of people can be like, I don't understand, and I don't want to understand. Like, I'm just going to back away from you, and
Yeah.
you deal with this on your own.
And I think that does happen. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
so fortunate and grateful. It puts me in a place of wanting to be well. I owe that to my husband and my kids. They deserve nothing less. But unfortunately, I think some partners and some relationships, they aren't able, to get through that. And I think that's where I do feel there needs to be maybe more support for those living alongside, just to know. My husband wasn't sure, do I give her an ultimatum? Is she going to leave the family? How much should I, press into her to go and get help? I think a lot of times family members are walking on eggshells. They see the warning signs, but it really did have to come from me. And I think realizing what I was about to lose, that's when I sort of went, ooh, this is serious now. So, my hope for everyone and every other, family out there is that they could get to a point. And I once spoke, there was someone that came, and their mother was actually, I believe, in a psychiatric home. And he came up to me later and he just said, thank you for explaining what was going on in your mind. I was always angry with my mom, and I told myself, I would never speak to her again. And you've just sort of given a bit of insight. And I now realize perhaps my mom, was just so overwhelmed with her disorder or an untreated mental health condition. And so now, I think sometimes we almost have to look at that behavior, the hurtful things that are said, as part of the illness versus, because a lot of times I said to my husband, I hate you. I mean, I'm ashamed to say it. We don't say that word in our house, but really what I meant was, I love you, don't leave. I'm just so frustrated and embarrassed and ashamed with my behavior that this is how I cope. Or, just, I don't know if I was sort of testing my husband, because I think sometimes we think we're not lovable, we're not worthy because of some of the things. And I always say, those darkest moments in my life, the behavior that I'm most ashamed of, they only account maybe for half a day in total of 4 decades of life. And so it's so easy to focus in and let those few moments define us. And there's an amazing quote. I love Pinterest. I love quotes, but I got to shout it out because I included it in my book. It's by Terry St. Cloud. And it says, she could never go back and make some of the details pretty. She could only move forward and make the whole beautiful. And so my hope for anyone thinking that they've ruined a relationship, or, their children right now maybe aren't in a place where they can, be in a relationship with them, don't give up. Don't beat yourself up. Just, move forward with hope that the whole of your life can absolutely be beautiful.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm just always looking for the silver linings. I know some people say you need to tone it down, and I will never tone it down, because I think the world needs as much positivity and hope and light.
Yes.
And even if it's only a glimmer, if I can give that to one person that's been newly diagnosed or is stuck in that, place of not being able to see, they say sometimes we're stuck in the middle of the tunnel. We can't see where we entered it, but we definitely can't see the light. If I can even encourage someone to take, one more step and believe, let me be the hope for you right now. It's possible. It's absolutely possible to live a happy, fulfilling, normal, and what is normal life. Yeah.
So and I know you've kind of touched on it throughout what you were just talking about. But if someone has a partner who is bipolar, what are some of the things that they can do specifically or say that help support you? And what are some of the things you shouldn't say?
Right, right. Well, I'll speak to someone who thinks their partner probably has bipolar or a mental health condition that hasn't been treated. I think that's where the most pain and hopelessness can be found in terms of someone living alongside. I'll speak to that. So it's really tough. I needed to get to that place of being willing to get help. And I don't know if there's anything other than that ultimatum that would have got me to that place. I think my best advice, number one, and I will add, I did tell my husband, you are not allowed to seek help. I don't want you talking to your brother or your father. I wanted to keep our family Christmas card that perfect image. So I didn't want to risk him opening up and other people finding out. So I now realize that was so unfair. So some advice I would give is get yourself support or help. It is so difficult to navigate and support someone that doesn't know they need help. That is so physically and mentally exhausting. So reach out, join a support group. I don't know if I divulged this, but my husband had actually gone against my wishes, thank goodness, and joined an anonymous online support group. And I actually walked into his office and stumbled upon that screen and, of course, was livid, angry. How did you think you could betray me? But, I totally understand he needed to get that support, even if it's opening up to one very trusted friend. And then I wish I had some amazing, magic advice that would work every time. But ultimately, I think people need to take responsibility for themselves. And so what you can do as someone living alongside is just sort of gently set some boundaries. I'm not okay with this behavior. I love you, I care about you, but I cannot stay if this is how I'm being treated. And my husband would often just remove himself because I would try to engage, I would try to push his buttons or be mean. And he said, you know what? I'm out. Like, I'm going to go for a drive. Of course, that made me even more angry, but he had every right to set those boundaries for himself. So let's see. Okay, I definitely have things not to say in terms of when I'm depressed, snap out of it, go for a walk, drink some water. I think what people that have never experienced depression is that it's not that easy. And sometimes those are the simplest things that we think are the easiest, but they're even like climbing mountains and you just feel so overwhelmed. And so best thing my husband says is, take the pressure off. It is okay. Do you need a nap? Go and lay down. Do not feel guilty. Remember this will pass and just take the pressure off. And I think I always compared myself to other people, all these other moms cooking 5-course meals. And I have to understand that is most definitely not my gifting. Give me a canvas and some paints and I will go to town.
Yeah.
And, I finally realized that's okay. So just to take the pressure off, and another thing to help someone is just, sometimes someone won't actually tell you, I really need groceries and I'm too nervous to go. So, don't wait for them to say that. If you know that could really help, just go get the groceries, put on your mask. We're still wearing masks, or order a pizza to the door, because in those darker moments, just offer to pick up their kids from school, offer to take their kids for an hour if they're a parent and they're overwhelmed. Just simple things. Another thing that I've heard is when someone is in a better place, ask them, how can I best support you when you're not in a good place? Because when we're not in a good place, those phone calls, they will go unanswered. You will leave your messages. We will hear them. They will go into a reservoir that hopefully we will be able to draw from in our darkest moments, but you probably won't get a true answer. You won't get a call back. So when someone's in a really great place, that is a good time to say, I'm really worried when you don't answer my calls. What's the best thing? Should I keep calling? Should I leave a message? And so those are just a few of the ways that other folks can support people, but I will acknowledge it's not easy. But I want to give you the hope. Here comes the hope.
Yay! That's what we're going to give.
We love it. There was a day when I looked at my husband and did say, I will never see a doctor. I will never get help. I will never take medication. Wow. And here I am, went to the doctor. Yes, I am on medication. And now I'm out, like, sharing with the world. So if I'm not proof that, it's possible for someone to actually make those changes, go for help, do the things that they need to do to stay well. Don't even know what I was saying.
No, that is.
Let me be that hope for any, husband or partner out there. And those are the bulk of the messages I get. And I wish I had better advice, but, just hang on.
Like communicate.
And also gentle always works better, coming alongside gently versus responding in anger, or, for me, an ultimatum did work, but I think it's kind of like when your parent says your full name and you're in trouble. For my husband to actually say, this is it. If you don't go, this will happen. That's the moment. That's what I wasn't willing to lose. And so that's what it took for me. I wish that I had gone for help decades earlier. There were definitely low points where I know now I needed to go for help. And I probably needed to go to the hospital, to emergency. Even if I had needed to be put, in a psychiatric ward for an evaluation, I know I would have been given a diagnosis 20 years earlier. And so, that's a lot of hurt and heartache that I could have avoided. But I'm not looking in the rearview mirror. I'm going forward and I'm making the whole beautiful.
Yes, that's what you're doing. So in terms of recognizing symptoms, and, as you said, like you didn't want to go get treatment, you didn't want to see a doctor. How does one, maybe as a supportive partner, or even yourself who's trying to, figure out and navigate your emotions and feelings, what are the certain things, like the mania, what do these things look like?
Right. Okay. This is fabulous. So I think I need to give another quick synopsis of bipolar, just for anyone watching that might not know what it is. So if you were to go on WebMD, the official diagnosis is bipolar disorder is a serious mental illness that brings unpredictable and extreme changes in mood, energy, and behavior. And these swings range from periods of extreme highs, which is the mania, or the hypomania. I can talk a little bit to those. And the other swing to the opposite extreme, the depression. So actually, bipolar was known as manic depression. It had a name change in 1980. So a lot of people don't even know that's the same mental health struggle. Manic depression, now known as bipolar. But there's so much to know. So I'm not a doctor or an expert, but basically there are actually several types, but the two most common are bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. The difference being the severity of the mania. So bipolar 1, you will hit full-blown mania, which is flying higher than a kite. That is where you get very reckless behavior, spending thousands on a car in an afternoon. You can also have hallucinations, psychosis. Oftentimes, it needs to be treated. Someone needs to be hospitalized to get the help they need. They can often be very risky or dangerous, even believing they have superpowers. So that's bipolar 1 and full-blown mania. And then there's bipolar 2. A lot of people will call it diet bipolar or bipolar light. I'm not going to call it that because they say bipolar 2, you experience more of the depression side, which can be so difficult. But bipolar 2 mania is a little less severe. It's called hypomania. And that presents as explosive creativity, rapid speech. You can't sleep. You're just so amped. If you were to meet me hypomanic, I'll talk to anyone on the street. I'll go into a designer store without being insecure. Just life is fantastic. Life is good. You wouldn't necessarily, warning bells wouldn't go off. You would just think, she is so fun. And that is genuine in those moments. But I definitely know I can identify those hypomanic moments now, because I definitely know that there were days that I didn't feel that confident and I can barely get out of my house. Walking up the street is a struggle versus literally doing twirls and flips up the street. So two main types, and a lot of people say, what causes it? There are three factors. It's absolutely, I think this is the most important one. It's absolutely biological. My brain is wired differently. And my neurotransmitters, the chemical messengers in my brain, they're not working as they should. Unfortunately, there is no blood test to take. There's no gene that they've discovered yet, but absolutely it is biological. That has helped me so much in knowing that this isn't my fault. It's also helped me in my decision. And I know it's personal for everyone, but my decision to take medication, once I realized biologically, my brain
and accepted it.
A little bit of help, getting those things. That's fine. I think we take medication for so many other things without a second thought. EpiPens, even prescription lenses for our eyes. So absolutely biological. A lot of people say, oh my goodness, does it run in families? Is it hereditary? Yes, there is a component. It's not a guarantee, but there's definitely a genetic predisposition. And for me, going up my family tree, there's definitely a history of mental illness. Okay. And the third one, I didn't know this until I started researching. It can actually be triggered by a traumatic or extremely stressful life event. So, a lot of soldiers that come back from combat, they can experience, bipolar can be triggered. So the way I understand it in my non-professional mind, if you're genetically predisposed, there can definitely be a life event that triggers it. And, I do in my own life, I wonder if that breakup that devastated me, if that was maybe one of the switches, as well as that move when I was 10. And so in terms of signs and symptoms, this is where it gets very foggy and very gray. Normally, to be diagnosed, there is a giant manual called the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. I think that's what it's called. It basically has criteria. If you tick off the boxes, if you meet enough, you'll come out with a diagnosis. The problem is there are so many symptoms of other mental health struggles and disorders that overlap. So I think a lot of people get a misdiagnosis, or I think the statistic is maybe up to 4. People will, receive a misdiagnosis, or they'll just be diagnosed with the depression or the anxiety because perhaps the mania doesn't present. But for bipolar disorder, you must have had one depressive episode, but also one manic or hypomanic. And so the defining feature, what sets bipolar apart, is that mania. And so for me, looking back, there were definitely, those bursts of energy where I had just a flight of ideas, just the happiest mood on the planet, far above what would be considered, you're in a great mood. It's like, you're in a fantastic mood, flying 2,000 feet. And so I think what's so important, if you do notice that and the other thing about bipolar depression, it can be situational, but oftentimes it is just a prolonged period of depression where there is no connection. So, there's depression that someone might fall into after losing a job or the end of a relationship, but bipolar depression can be more of just an ongoing, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I've lost all motivation. So my best advice is, if you think that you may have bipolar disorder or another disorder, if life is really hard. So I would say, if your anxiety is crippling you, if it's getting in the way of doing normal activities or functioning, that's when you need to seek help. And my best advice is, when you get in front of the doctor, lay your pride and defenses aside, realize that they are there to help. This is why they're in this profession, and they are on your side. And the ultimate goal, even though it's not fun, I did not want to go to a doctor and say, I'm having trouble brushing my teeth and pulling my pants up some days. I had to remind myself, the goal The end result is to get a proper diagnosis, because once you have a proper diagnosis, whatever the name needs to be, I do not like hearing the word bipolar, but whatever that is, whatever name it is, once you have a name, then you have a starting point to getting well. And that's all that really matters, whatever your disorder, you know. And I think a lot of people, they just don't want that official diagnosis, because then they think it means all these things and it's a label that's been slapped on them. So my best advice here, I've been saying this for a while, I'm really going to give you the best advice.
I'm all ears.
Be 100% honest about everything. Do not sugarcoat. Do not leave out those suicidal thoughts or that self-harm. It's not comfortable. It's not easy, but you are in safe hands. It's confidential. It's the only way that you're going to get a proper diagnosis. And the other thing to remember is some people's mania or hypomania looks very different. So I actually know someone that left this part out when they went to the doctor, but their hypomania meant going on a road trip, getting in the car and going on a road trip that they normally would never take. But they didn't think to mention that to the doctor because they thought that isn't a sign. But the more info, the more clues you can give your doctor, because your doctor is going to look at that DSM, but they're also going to ask you about family history, life experiences. And so I wish so much that I, only since my diagnosis have I really dug in and asked my parents, was there mental illness on our family? Oh, grandma had depression and a little bit of schizophrenia. Only now, if I had known that, that would have just been an extra clue to give the doctor.
Yes.
And so that's my best advice. And you know what? Better to go and get help. And I think we think it's a sign of weakness to get help, but it's actually a sign of incredible strength, incredible wisdom. I just, like I said before, I wish I had gone so much sooner. So it never hurts to go and get checked out. No, it's not fun. You're going to be asked a million uncomfortable questions. It's okay. It's just to get to that end result. And if you come out with a diagnosis, amen to that.
Yeah.
That only means you now have just upped your chances of treating yourself, coping with your disorder, and then just basically getting on with life. You don't want to have that in your way. It's like,
no.
let's figure it out. Let's figure it out and let's deal with it and then move on. And that's my advice for anyone, looking for those signs and symptoms. So for bipolar, it's the mania.
I really love your perspective on this, because it makes it very relatable for, like, what you just said made it so relatable to people and just so positive and non judgmental and clinical.
You're gonna make me cry.
Yeah, well, this is what I do. I make myself cry and other people cry. So it's just, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I want to bring people's stories out and make them relatable to people so they know they can go get help.
Absolutely. I would have given anything to find one person, one video of someone telling me that it was going to be okay. And I think that's one of the main driving forces, behind me coming out, is that in those days after my diagnosis, I was devastated, ashamed, shocked, embarrassed. And then I did the worst thing. I went on Google and I punched in bipolar 2 disorder. And the images that came up were horrifying. It was the extreme of the extreme. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but quite a few years back, I won't mention names, but there was an interview with a celebrity who was clearly not in a good place. I don't even know why the interview were terrifying, heads spinning around and just nothing positive. No one that seemed to be living, a happy life. And so I think that's, unfortunately, the bipolar spectrum is so vast that so many of those stereotypes come from seeing the extremes. And unfortunately, yes, there are people that are not treated, or they're in a really desperate place and they are doing those, more extreme things. But there is also this vast, part of the spectrum, doctors, wives, lawyers, students, artists, People that are, we're just normal people. And I think when I
Yeah.
saw all of those stereotypes, I just felt like I didn't fit any of them. And I thought I can either sit on this for the rest of my life, you know, might be easier. I don't have to, I thought I would embarrass myself. And I just thought if I do that, there's no opportunity for me to change
Yeah.
that perception. And I'm not doing anyone any help by, making them still believe that I have my life in order, because I definitely, did not at that time. And so I just thought, if I can put one more face of bipolar into the world that is a little bit more relatable, then,
Yeah.
that's why I'm here. If I can help others in the process, even better. And what I didn't realize is that it's been just as beneficial and healing for me to come forward with my journey, and
Yeah.
so those are some of the driving forces. But I really, really hope that I'm relatable and I can, show people that yes, we are safe, we are predictable, we can accomplish things. I think there are so many of these perceptions that are so false. And I think someone newly diagnosed could easily get stuck in believing
Yeah.
those things. So my greatest hope is to be relatable. So
Well, you're doing a
thank
great
you for
job.
that. Yay.
One question that you kind of touched on just now, like, what are some of the positive things that have happened to you because of bipolar, and how has this changed your perspective on life?
Right. Oh, too many to count, which is the reason I once was asked in an interview, if there was a magic pill to cure you, would you take it? And I'm not going to take it, I said. And he said, you're the first person that said that. And I think because I choose to focus on all of the positives that it brings, and I think we
Yeah.
don't hear enough about them. People with bipolar disorder, the people that I've been able to connect with since coming
Yeah.
forward, are the most brilliant, fun, creative, empathetic people in the entire world. And so for me, having bipolar disorder allows me extreme emotion, but I think it's proof to me that I am living a very full life.
Yes.
So, I feel extreme joy, also extreme sadness, but I think you appreciate a sunny day so much more
Yeah.
after, a period of rain, which we get in Vancouver a lot. But I think it's made me more appreciative. But I'm, all in 150% or nothing. So I do feel like I am experiencing life to its fullest. My creativity, I know for a fact that the way my brain has been wired allows me to come up with these ideas. So, I have a backlog of screenplays, t-shirt ideas,
Oh,
Broadway musicals. And so, it's up to me now to be responsible with managing those hypomanic episodes, which still come despite being on medication. And so as long as I can harness that energy, it's also, I think, allows me, having bipolar, having struggled myself, and knowing what it's like to be depressed firsthand, I think it's allowed me to connect with other people on a very, very deep and
mhm.
real and meaningful level. And, I'm not really one for small talk. So to be able to connect with people,
Yes.
meeting someone else with bipolar 2 disorder or any other mental health struggle, there's this instant connection
Yeah.
when you, can relate on such a deep level. And so, the list goes on, but I really do also feel like, this is the way I've been wired. The world needs our brains. We all don't need brains that think the same. And so I think a creative brain that thinks far outside the box, we need those brains to add color to the world, come up with creative solutions, add a bit of spice. And so for all of those reasons, I will always choose to look at my bipolar in a positive light. And yes, there is the darker side. There are definitely things that are a struggle. It's not easy to manage them, but it's possible. And I also have to remind myself, everybody has something that
Yes.
they need to deal with. And we can either allow it to, destroy us, break us down, believe the worst, or we can use it as an opportunity to build ourselves into the most, the best versions of ourselves, the most beautiful and resilient. Someone also in England during an interview. So I love quotes and interviews. I think her name is Liz Fox, but she said in an interview once, "I'm so glad that I allowed myself to break and kind of to shatter into a million pieces." And she was talking about just, kind of getting to that point of needing help. And I think she said so many people sort of live just under the surface where they're almost falling apart, but they are not willing to go and get help. And she said, because I was willing to sort of let myself fall apart, I was able, and I think this is so beautiful, she was able to look and pick up the pieces and put them back together in a more beautiful way. And there's also that image of, I think in Japan, broken pottery, they put back together and they put gold. They put gold in the seams. And I think oftentimes it's those parts of us that we think we need to hide away, or, we think we need to be most ashamed of. Those are the parts that are going to allow us to help others or connect with others, and they actually become, a source of strength. And, for me to be able to share the most painful parts of my life, but now know that they are maybe, just maybe, being used to help others, it takes something so painful and it gives it purpose and meaning. And, knowing that me sharing my most embarrassing moments could help someone else seek help, or maybe save a marriage or their own life,
Yes.
that to me makes it all worthwhile.
Oh, God. I love you, Julie. I love you. Honestly, I think like this whole entire discussion, I have just had chills the entire time. And you are so passionate about this. And
very passionate.
And we're just about to close off this discussion, but I do want to ask, what's next for Julie?
Well, I had mentioned I have a million ideas. So I have written my memoir, and that's another thing. Huge accomplishment for me. I think another misconception is that bipolar folks aren't able, or I will say people with bipolar, but you know what? Another thing, language. Are we bipolar? Do we have bipolar? I used to waffle back and forth. Because I've accepted it and I don't see it as a negative thing, you can call me whatever you want. But yeah. I do understand that it's just a small part of me, but I think as an advocate, I've fully embraced it. But what's next for me? I did write the memoir, and what I was saying with, I think one of the misconceptions is that we can start things but not finish. We can't focus. And so it's one of the finishes in my life. I was a queen of starts, but it was one of the most challenging things I did. But I wrote my memoir, and so knowing that I did it once, I may or may not have a few more book ideas. I also created a children's book just with a passion to start the conversation with kids of a younger age. I think if there had been a book like that for me as that over-dramatic little girl, it really would have helped. I mean, I think we didn't talk about mental health back in the 70s and the 80s. But I'm so hopeful about all the initiatives nowadays. And yes, movies, documentaries. All I know is that I'm not stopping. I'm going to keep advocating whenever I can. I'm going into a little bit of a busier season in my life. So that's another important thing, is to know where to set boundaries and where my limits. Sometimes I do take a break from social media, but if I go quiet, I am either working on some project, on the sidelines, or I'm just taking a much needed break because I don't want to burn out. I still do have to take care of myself. There are so many parts of my, treatment plan, getting to a place of being well. And so I have to just be careful, but fiery, explosively passionate, and
the beautiful, unique you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am so happy we had this conversation. I think it's really extremely important. I think you've touched on some wonderful topics for people to, and strategies, and just what you've gone through. It's so inspiring, and I know a lot of people will get a lot out of this conversation. And I'm also very excited because Julie is going to be doing a little speaking for a special thing that I'm going to be launching this weekend. So very excited. And you can also find her. She has it's a podcast or like a video montage of.
Yep, I think
Well,
we
this is
call it
bipolar.
vlog/podcast, but I've got everything on my website, resources even, other advocates that I follow, a bit more about my journey. So anyone that's interested, if you're looking for a little more light, hope, or some resources, definitely juliekraft.com, and then you can, it's a one-stop shop, much easier than trying to, so yes, hopefully on there, there's more encouragement, more resources, a few more interviews. And, if I just want to thank you too for, starting this movement. These interviews, they're just so important. They didn't exist back in 2010 was when I was diagnosed. It would have meant the world to even see one of these interviews. So you are doing such important work, and I'm just, it's an honor and a privilege to be here to share. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank yous all around. The love is just flowing through the screen. And hopefully we will meet each other in person sometime soon.
Yes, fellow Canadian, yes.
Yes. So thank you to Julie, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and will watch out for her new books and musicals and t-shirts and all of this.
Sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit, and
Sky's the limit.
you'll be hearing more from her through the Joy Tribe Co. as well. We will be keeping in touch because I love her so much. And I hope you guys really take in this information. Again, we are not therapists. We are not, we can't diagnose you. We're only here to share the stories and the experiences that people are going through. So maybe you can identify or seek hope. But if you are feeling depression or anxiety, please seek help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll see you all again. Bye, Julie.
Bye.
Bye.